Make sure everything's working here. I guess I unplugged it. That's okay though. I was tired. I was tired and there was an hour left and I didn't want to do it. Okay, so chapter 20 of The Prince. Nicholas Machiavelli here. Whether the citadels and many other things which princes often make use of are profitable or damageable. Some princes, whereby they may safely keep their state, have disarmed their subjects. Some others have held their towns under their dominion, divided into factions. Others have maintained enmities against themselves. Others have applied themselves to gain them, where they have suspected at their entrance into the government. Others have built fortresses, and other again have ruined and demolished them. And however that upon all these things a man cannot well pass a determinate sentence, unless one comes to the particulars of these states, where some such like determinations were to be taken. Yet I shall speak of them in so large a manner as the master of it so will bear. It was never then that a new prince would disarm his own subjects, but rather than he hath found them disarmed. He hath always armed them, for being beloved, those arms become thine. Those become faithful, which thou hadst in suspicion, and whose which were faithful are maintained so. And thy subjects are made thy partisans, and because all thy subjects cannot be put in arms, when thou bestowest favors on those thou armest, with the others thou canst deal more for thy safety. And the difference of proceeding which they know among them obliges them to thee. Those others excuse thee, judging it necessary that they have deserved more, who have undergone more danger, and so have greater obligation. But when thou disarmest them, thou beginnest to offend them. You have the right to kill them. I'm not putting up with this at all. Girls, that thou distrustest them, either for cowardice or small faith, and the one or other of those two opinions provokes their hatred against thee, and because thou canst not stand disarmed, thou must then turn thyself to mercenary, soldiery, whereof we have formerly spoken what it is, and when it is good. It can never be so much as to defend thee from powerful enemies and suspected subjects. Therefore, as I have said, a new prince and a new principality hath always ordained them arms. Of examples to this purpose, histories are full. But when a prince gains a new state, which as a member he adds to his ancient dominions, then it is necessary to disarm that state, unless it be those whom thou hast discovered to assisted thee in the conquest thereof, and these also in time and upon occasions. It is necessary to render delicate and assimilate, and so order them that all the arms of thy state be in thy hands of thy own soldiers, who live in thy ancient state near unto thee. Our ancestors, and they have that were accounted sages, were wont to say that it was necessary to hold Pistoia in factions, and Pisa was fortresses, and for this cause maintained some town subject to them in differences, whereby he told it more easily. This at what time Italy was balanced in a certain manner might be well done, but methinks it cannot now a days be well given for a precept, for I do not believe that divisions made can do any good. Rather it must needs be that when the enemy approaches, there cities divided are presently lost, for always the weaker part will cleave to the foreign power, and the other not to be able to subject the Venetians, moved by the afford reasons. Maintained the factions of the Guelphs and Ghibellines in their towns, and however they never suffered them to spill one another's blood, yet they nourished these differences among them, to the end that the citizens employed in these quarrels should not plot any these against them, which as it proved never served them in any greater purpose, for being defeated at Vela. Presently one of those two factions took courage and seized upon their whole state. Therefore such like ways argued the prince's weakness for in a strong principality they never will suffer such divisions, For they shew them some kind of profit in time of peace, being they are able to means thereof more easily to manage their subjects. But war coming, such like orders discover their fallacy without doubt. Princes become great when they overcome the difficulties and oppressions that are made against them, and therefore so, too, especially when she hath to make any new prince great. Quit listening to these individuals who have the ark. Come to me, who hath more need to gain reputation than any hereditary prince causes enemies to rise against him, and him to undertake against them, to the end he may have occasion to master them, and know that ladder which his enemies have set him upon whereby to rise yet again. And therefore many think that a wise prince, when he hath the occasion, ought cunningly to nourish some enmity, that by suppressing thereof his greatness may grow. No! Thereupon princes, especially those that are new and have found more faith and profit in those men who in the beginning of their state have been held suspect, than in those who at their entrance have been their confidants. Pandolfus Petrucci, Prince of Siena, governed his state more with them than that had been suspected by him, than with others. But of this matter we cannot speak at large, because it varies according to the subject. I will only say this, that those men who in the beginning of a principality were once enemies, if they be of quality, so that to maintain themselves they have need of support, the prince might always, with the greatest facility, gain for his mark. And they are the rather forced to serve him faithfully, insomuch as they know it more necessary for them by their deeds. Hi, how are you? To cancel that sinister opinion which was once held of them. And so the prince ever draws from these more advantage than from those who serving him too supinely neglect his affairs. And seeing the matter requires it, I will not omit to put a prince in mind, who hath anew made himself master of a state, by means of the inward helps he had from thence, that he consider well the cause that moved them that favoured him to favour him, if it be not a natural affection towards him. For if it be only because they were not content with their former government, with much pains and difficulties shall he be able to keep them long his friends, because it will be impossible for him to content them. By these examples then which are drawn out of ancient and modern affairs, searching into the cause thereof, he shall find it much more easy to gain these men of friends, who formerly were contented with the state and therefore were his enemies, and then those who, because they were not contented therewith, become his friends, and favoured him in getting the mastery of it. It hath been the custom of princes whereby to hold their states more securely, to build citadels which might be bridles and curbs to those that should purpose anything against them, and so to have a secure retreat from the first violences. I commend this course, because it has been used of old, notwithstanding Nicholas Vitelli in our days hath been known to demolish 2 citadels in the town of Castello, the better to keep states. Guy de Baldo, Duke of Urban, being to return into his state, out of which he was given by Caesar Borgia, razed all the fortresses of the country, and thought he should hardly lose that state again without them. The Benevoti, returning into Bologna, used the like courses. Citadels then are profitable, or not, according to the times, and if they advantage thee in one part, they do thee harm in another. And this part may be argued thus: that prince who stands more in fear of his own people than of strangers ought to build fortresses, but he is that more afraid of strangers than of his people should let them alone. Against the house of Sforza, the castle of Milan, which Francis Sforza built, hath and will make most than any other disorder in that state, and therefore the best citadel that may be is not to incur the people's hatred. For however thou holdest a fortress, and the people hate thee, thou canst hardly escape them. For people, once they have taken arms, never want to help the stranger at their need to take their parts. In our days we never saw that they ever profited, any prince, unless it were the Countess of Furli. When Count Hirienmyo of Fuji, her husband, was slain, for by means thereof she escaped the people's rage and attended aid from Milan, and so recovered her state. And then such were the times the stranger could not assist the people. Now. How now that I see, okay, now. Afterwards, they served her a little purpose, whencefore Borgia assailed her, and that the people which was her enemy sided with the stranger. Therefore both then, at the first it would have been more for her safety not to have been odious to the people, than to have held the fortresses. These things being well weighed, then, I will commend those that shall build up fortresses, and him also that shall not. And I will blame him, however he be, that's relying upon those shall make small account of being hated by his people. Chapter 21. How a prince ought to behave himself to gain reputation. Thank you, ladies. There's nothing gains a prince such repute as great exploits and rare trials of himself in heroic actions. We have now in our days Ferdinand, King of Aragon, the pretense King of Spain, the present King of Spain. He in a manner may be termed a new prince, for from a very weak king he has now become for fame and glory the first king of Christendom. And if you shall well consider his actions, you shall find them all illustrious, and every one of them extraordinary. He in the beginning of his reign assailed Granada, Canada, and that exploit was the ground of his state. At first, he made that war in security, and without suspicion he should be any ways hindered, and therein held the barons of Castilian minds busied, who, thinking upon that war, never minded any innovation. In the while he gained credit and authority with them, they not, being aware of it, was able to maintain with the church and the people's money all his soldiers, and to lay a foundation for his military ordinances with that long war, which afterwards gained in exceeding much honor. Besides this, to the end he might be able hereamong to undertake greater matters, serving himself always of the color of religion. He gave himself to kind of religious cruelty, chasing and disposing those Jews out of the kingdom. Nor can this example be more admirable and rare. Under the same cloak he invaded as Rick, and went through with his exploit in Italy. And last of all hath he essayed France, and so awaits proceeded on forwards, contriving of great matters, which always have held his subjects' minds in peace and admiration, and busied in attending the event what it should be. And these his actions have thus grown one upon another, that they have never given leisure to men so to rest as they might ever plot anything against them. Moreover, it much avails a prince to give extraordinary proofs of himself touching the government within, such as those we have heard of Bernard of Milan. Whensoever occasion is given by anyone that may off astute some great thing, either of good or evil, in the civil government, and to find out some way either to reward or punish it, whereof in the weird much notice may be taken. And above all things, the prince ought to endeavor in all his actions to spread abroad a fame of his magnificence and worthiness. A prince also is well esteemed when he is a true friend or a true enemy, when without any regard he discovers himself in favor of one against another, which course shall be always more profitable than to find neither. For if two mighty ones that are thy neighbors come to fall out, or are of such quality that one of them vanquishing thou art like to be fear of the vanquisher, or not, in either of these two cases it will never prove more it will never prove more for thy profit to discover thyself and make a good war of it. Okay, so that makes sense. So I just had a thought. So Jupiter and Mercury. I just had a cloud, dude. So it was in the shape of one of the Star Destroyers in Star Wars, the pyramid. But the guy was literally hanging. It's like on the Google Maps, but you could see the full head, and his hand was like he was waving at me like this, hanging out the cockpit. But it was like a little Star Destroyer. He was being cute about it. So that makes sense. I just thought that too. I was like, okay, so Jupiter's ahead of us? How does this work? A prince also is well esteemed. Okay, when he is a true friend or true enemy, when without any regard he discovers himself in favor of one against another. With course he shall always more profit than to find neuter. For if two mighty ones that are thy neighbors come to fall out, or are of such quality that one of them vanquishing thou are like to be in fear of the vanquisher or not, in either of these two cases it will ever prove more of thy profit to discover thyself and make good war of it. For in the first case, if thou discover not thyself, thou shalt always be a prey to him that overcomes, to the contentment and satisfaction of the vanquished. Neither shalt thou have reason on thy side, nor anything else to defend or receive thee. For he that overcomes will not have any suspected friends, that give him no assistance in his necessity, and he that loses receives thee not, because thou wouldest not with thy arms in hand gun the hazard of his fortune. Anticius passed into Greece, there unto induced by the Aetolians to chase the Emons thence, and sent his ambassadors to the Achaeans, who were the Ammon's friends, to persuade them to stand neutral on the other side of the Romans, move them to join armies with theirs. This matter came to be deliberated on the council of the Achaeans, where Anaximus, his ambassador, encouraged them to stand nearer, where unto the Romans' ambassador afterwards, touching the course that is commended to you as best and profitable for your state, to wit, not to intimidate, to intermeddle in the war between us. Nothing can be more against you, because not taking either part, you shall remain with our thanks and without expectation, a prey to the conqueror. And it will always come to pass that he who is not thy friend will require the neutrality, and he that is thy friend will urge thee to discover thyself by taking arms for him, and evil adversaries, princes, to avoid the present dangers. Follow oftentimes the ways of neutrality, and most commonly go to thine. But when a prince discovers himself strongly in favor of a party, if he to whom thou cleavest overcomes, however, that he be puissant, and thou remainest at his disposing, he is obliged to thee, and there is a contract of friendship made, and men are never so openly dishonest as with such a horronious example of dishonesty to oppress thee. Besides, victories are never so prosperous. The conqueror is like neglect all respects, and especially of justice. But if he to whom thou stickest loses, thou art received by him, and while he is able he aids thee, and to thou becomes partner of a fortune that may arise again. The second case, when they that enter into the lists together are of such quality, that thou needest not fear him that vanquisheth, so much the more the discretion to thee to stick to him. For thou goest to ruin one with his assistance, who ought to do the best he could to save him, if he were well advised, and he overcoming is less at thy discretion, and it is unprofitable, but with thy aid he must overcome. And there is to be noted that a prince should be well aware never to join with any more powerful than himself, to ascend another unless upon necessity, as formerly is said, for when he overcomes, though are left at his discretion. And princes, let me explain it like this. Mark, let me finish this. We're going to get into Iran. To offend another unless upon necessity, as formerly is said, for when he overcomes, thou are lest to his discretion. And princes ought to avoid as much as they are able to stand at another's discretion. The Venetians took part with France against the Duke of Milan, and yet could have avoided that partaking, from which proceeded their ruin. But when it cannot be avoided, as it befell the Florentines, when the Pope and the King of Spain went both with their armies to Lombardy, there the prince ought to side with them for the reasons aforesaid, nor let any saint think they are able to such sure parties, but rather they are all doubtful. For in the order of things, we find it always thus whenever a man seeks to avoid one inconvenient, he incurs another, but the principal point of judgment is in the difference between the qualities of inconvenience and not taking the bad for the good. Moreover, a prince ought to shew himself a lover of virtue, and there honors those that excel in every art. Afterwards ought he encourage his citizens, whereby they may be enabled quickly to exercise their faculties, as well as merchandise and husbandry, as in any other kind of traffic, to the end that no man forbear to adorn and cultivate his profession, for fear that he be deployed of them, or any other to open the commerce upon the danger of heavy impositions, but rather to provide towards for those that shall set these matters afoot, or for anyone else that shall any way implicit this city or state. Besides, he ought to be fit times of the year entertain the people with feats and marks, and because every city is divided in companies and arts and tribes, he ought to take special notice of those bodies, and sometimes afford them a meeting and give them some proof of his humanity and magnificence, yet withal holding firm the majestic of this state, for this must never fail in any case. So so the Earth's rotation. So let's look at it like this. If you, in a 24-hour span, if you take that 24-hour span and a non-windy day, there's no wind the entire day. So the Earth revolves. So this spot is in this spot before this spot. So when this spot transpires first, this first spot can then kill the second spot. Do you see with that rotation? Trade wind or no trade wind, on a 24-hour day when there's no wind at all, there is no trade wind. So that rotation there, the people on the other side of that planet affect you. So whatever you're saying about Iran, you're complete bullshit. If they wanted to, they would. Here, let me help you, sir. You look distraught. Abraham, what is this? Chap 22, touching Prince Secretary. Callisto, please. And then you have me going on that. It's like, It is no small importance to a prince the choice he makes of servants being ordinarily good or bad. No, as his wisdom's is. No. And the first conjecture one gives of a great man of his understanding is upon the fight of his followers and servants he hath about him, when they prove able and faithful, and when may he always be reputed wise, because he hath known how to discern those that are able, and to keep them true to him. But when they are otherwise, there can be no good conjecture made of him. For the first error he commits in this choice, there was no man that had any knowledge of Antony of Vanistro, the servant of Panelsis, Petrucci, prince of Siena, who did not esteem Panelsis for a very discreet man, having him for his servant. And because there are three kinds of understanding, the one that is advised by itself, the other that understands when it is informed by another, the third that neither is advised by itself nor by the demonstration of another. The first is best, the second is so good, and the last quite unprofitable. Therefore it was of necessity that it pendulous its triad not the first degree. Yet he goes to the second. For whenever any one hath the judgment to discern between the good and the evil that any one does and says, however, that he hath not his invention from himself, yet still comes he to take notice of the good or evil actions of the servant. and those he cherishes, and these he suppresses, insomuch that the servant, finding no means to deceive his master, keeps himself upright and honest. But how a prince may thoroughly understand his servant? Here's a way that never fails. When thou feels the servant, finding more his own advantage than thine, and that with all his actions he searches most after his own profit. This man thus qualified shall never prove good servant, nor canst thou ever rely upon him. For he that holds the stern of the state in hand ought never call home his cares, to his own particular, but give himself wholly over to his prince. Nor ever put him in mind of anything not appertaining to him. And on the other side, the prince, to keep him good to him, ought to take a care for his servant, honoring him, enriching and obliging him to him, giving him part both of dignities and offices, to the end that many honors and much wealth bestowed on him may restrain his desires from other honors. Knowing he is not able to stand without his master. And when both the princes and the servants are thus disposed, they may rely one upon the other, when otherwise the end will ever prove hurtful for the one as well as for the other. Chap 23. That flatterers are to be avoided. I will not omit one principle of great importance, being in error, from which princes which thus difficulty defend themselves, unless they be very diverse and make a very good choice. And this is concerning flatterers, whereof all writings are full, and that because men please themselves so much as in their own things, and therein cozen themselves, that very hardly can they escape this pestilence, and desiring to escape it. I promise you they dragged you down with them, together of falling into contempt. I promise you, every single one of you. For there is no other way to be secured from flattery, but to let men know. I'm gonna crush skulls, I promise you. It's not a joke at all. And that's from my eyeball. That is from Mark. To let men know that they displease thee not in telling thee truth, but then everyone hath this leave. Thou losest thy reverence. Therefore ought a wise prince take a third course, making a choice of some understanding men in his state, and give only to them a free liberty of speaking to him the truth, and touching those things only which he inquires of, and nothing else. But he ought to be inquisitive of everything, and hear their opinions, and then afterwards advise himself after his own manner. I cannot wait. And in these deliberations, and with every one of them to carry himself, that they all know that the more freely they shall speak, the better they shall be liked of, and besides those not give ear to anyone, and those pursue the thing resolved on, and thence continue obstinate in the resolution taken. He who does otherwise either falls upon flatterers, or often changes upon the varying of opinions, from whence proceed it that men conceive but slightly of him. You have the right to remain silent. This is an official arrest. Every single one of you have access to that electricity. I promise you, you are under arrest. To this purpose, I will allege you a modern example. Peter Lucas, a servant of Maximilian, the present emperor, speaking of his majesty, said that he never advised with anybody, nor never did anything after his own way, which was because he took a contrary course to what we have now said. For the emperor is a close man, who communicates his secrets to none, nor takes counsel of anyone. But as they come to be put in practice, they begin to be discovered and known, and so contradicted by those that are near about him. And he is being amicusy man, and he is being An easy man is quickly wrought from them whence. It comes that what he does today, he undoes on the morrow, and that he never understands himself what he would, nor what he purposes, and that there is no grounding upon any of his resolutions. I'll give you one. You are pardoned on one. A prince thereof ought always to take counsel, but as his own pleasure, and not at any other men's, or rather should take away any man's courage to advise him of anything but what he asks. But he ought well to ask at larger, and then touching the things inquired of, be a patient hearer of the truth. I'm not hearing you. I'm perceiving, I've heard it all, thank you. I'm perceiving, hi, how are you? Okay. And perceiving that for some respect, the truth were concealed from him, be displeased, their retreat. And because some men have thought that a prince that gains the opinion to be wise may be held so, and not by his own natural endowments, but by the good counsels he hath about him, without question they are deceived. For this is a general rule, and never fails, that a prince who of himself is not wise can never be well advised, unless he should light upon one alone, wholly to direct and govern him who himself was a very wise man. In this case it is possible he may be well governed, but this would last but little, for that governor in a short time would deprive him of his states. But a prince not having any parts of nature, being advised of more than one, shall never be able to unite these counsels. Of himself shall he never know how to unite them, and each of the counselors probably will follow that which is most properly his own. And he shall never find the means to amend or discern these things, nor can they fall otherwise, because men always prove mischievous, unless upon some necessity they be forced to become good. We conclude, therefore, that counsels from whence forever they proceed must needs take their beginning from the prince, wisdom, and not the wisdom of the prince from good counsel. Chap 24. Oh, there he goes. All right. Chapter 24. Wherefore the princes of Italy have lost their states. When these things above said are well observed, they make new prince seems as if he had been of old, and presently render him more secure and firm in the state than if he had already grown ancient therein. For a new prince in such more observed in this action than a prince by inheritances, and when they are known to be virtuous, men are much more gained and obliged to them thereby, and then by the antiquity of their blood. For men are much more taken by things present than by things past, and when in the present they find good, they content themselves therein, and seek no further, or rather they undertake the defense of him to their utmost, when the prince is not wanting in other matters to himself. And so shall he gain double glory to have given a beginning to new principality, adorned and strengthened it with good laws, good arms, and good examples, as he shall have double shame that is born a prince, and by reason of his small discretion hath lost it. And if we shall consider those lords, and in Italy have lost their states in our days, as the king of Naples, the Duke of Milan, and others, first we shall find in them a common defect, touching their arms, for the reason which have been above discoursed at length. Afterwards we shall see some of them that either shall have had the people for their enemies, or be it they had the people to friend, could never know how to assure themselves of the great ones. For without such defects as these states are not lost, which have so many nerves that they are able to maintain an army in the field. Philip of Macedon, not the father of Alexander the Great, but he that was vanquished by Titus Quintus. That's not pervert. We're not asking you. But he that was vanquished by Titus Quintius had not much state in regard of the greatness of the Romans and of Greece that assailed him, and nevertheless in that he was a warlike man and knew how to entertain the people and assure himself with the nobles. I assure you, you can stop doing that. For many years he made the waste good against them. Oh, it's more than waste, and they dragged you down with them. And though at last some towns perhaps were taken from him, yet the kingdom remained in his hands still. Wherefore these are princes who for many years had continued in their principalities, for having afterwards lost them, let them not blame fortune but their own sloth, because they never having thought during the time of quiet that they could suffer a change. When afterwards mischiefs came upon them, thought rather upon flying from them than upon their defense, in the hope that the people weary of the vanquished insolence would recall them with course when the others failed. But very ill is it to leave the other remedies, for a man would never go to fall being, believing another would come to take him up, which may either not come to pass, or it does. It is not for thy security, because that the defense of this is vile, and depends not upon thee. But those defenses are only good, certain, and durable, which depends upon thy own self and thy own virtues. Oh, you can believe it. Oh yeah. Chapter 25, how great power fortune hath in humane affairs, and what means there is to resist it. It is not unknown to me how that many have held opinion, and still hold it, that the affairs of the world are to be governed by fortune and by gold, that men by their wisdom cannot amend or alter them, or rather, but there is no remedy for them, and hereupon they would think that it were of no avail to take much pains in such a thing, but leave all to be governed by chance. This opinion hath gained the more credit in our days by reason of the great alteration of things, which we have late seen, and do every day see, beyond all humane conjecture, upon which I sometimes thinking am in some parrot inclined to their opinion. I'm behind you. I'm just asking for help. I'm entitled. That's where I'm at. I'm entitled, and you're ignoring me. That's what it comes down to. What you have said about me is false. Nevertheless, not to extinguish quite our own free will, I think it may be true that fortune is the mistress of one half of our actions, but yet that she lets us have rule of the other half, or a little less. And I likened her to precipitation torrent, when it rages, overflows the plains, or overthrows the trees. And buildings removes the earth from one side, and lays it another. Everyone flies before it. Everyone yields to the fury thereof, is unable to withstand it, and yet, however it be thus, when the times are calmer, men are able to make provision against these excesses with banks and senses, so that afterwards, when it was well again, it shall all pass. It was never well. All pass smoothly along within its channel, or else the violence thereof shall not prove so licentious and hurtful. In like manner be passed, it is with fortune, which there shews her power, where virtue is not ordained, to resist her, and thither return all her forces, where she perceives that no provisions nor resistances are made to uphold her. And if you shall consider Italy, which is the feet of these changes, and that which hath given them their motions, you shall see it to be a plain field. Nay, without any trench or bank, which had it been fenced with convenient virtue, as with Germany, Spain, or France. Well, Germany, well, they inflated intentionally. This inundation would never have caused these great alterations. It hath, or else would it not have reached to us, and this shall suffice to have said, touching the opposing of fortune in general, but restraining myself more to particulars. I say that today we see a prince prosper, and I flourish, and tomorrow utterly go in ruin, not to see in what he hath altered any condition or quality, which I believe arises first from the causes which we have long since run over. That is because that prince that relies wholly up in fortune runs as her wheel turns, the rotation of the planets. I believe also that he proves the fortune it man whole manner of proceeding meets with the quality of the times, and so likewise he unfortunate from whose course of proceeding the times differ, for we see that men in the things that induce them to the end proceed therein, deserve, some with respect, others more bold and rashly, one with violence, and the other with cunning, the one with patience, the other with its contrary, and everyone by several ways may strain thereto. We see also to be respective and wary men, the one come to his purpose and the other not, and in like manner to equally prosper, taking diverse courses. The one being weary of the other headstrong. Cain, which proceeds, I'll wear your name if you want to steal it, which proceeds from nothing else, back for revenge, but from the quality of the times which would agree or not with the proceeding from hence arrives that which I said, that the two working diversely produce the same effect, and two equally working, the one attains his end, the other not. Hereupon also depends the alteration of the good, for it to one that behaves himself with weariness and patience, times and affairs turn to favorably, that the carriage of his business prove well, he prospers. But if its times and assurances chance, he is ruined, because he changes not his manner of proceeding, nor is there any man so wise that he can frame himself hereunto, as well because he cannot go out of the way from that whereunto nature inclines him, as also for that one having always prospered, walking such a way, cannot be persuaded to leave it, and therefore the receptive and wary man, when it is fit time for time to use violence and force, knows how to put it to practice, whereupon he is ruined. But if he could change his disposition with the times and the affairs, he should not change his fortune. Pope Julius II proceeded in all his actions with very great violence, and found the times the things so comfortable to that his manner of proceeding, that in all of them he had happy success. For your defense, consider the first exploit he did at Bologna, even while John Bentivoglio lived. The Venetians were not well contented therewith. The King of Spain, likewise with the French, had treated of that enterprise, and notwithstanding all this, he stirred up by his own rage and fierceness, personally undertook that expedition, which action of his put in suspense, and stopped Spain and the Venetians, those for fear and the others for defer, to recover the kingdom of Naples, and on the other part drew after him the King of France. For the king, seeing him already in motion, and desiring to hold him his friend, whereby to humble the Venetians, thought he could no way deny him his soldiers, without doing him an open injury. Mark. And I need you to be loud. Julius then effected that with his violent and heady motion, which no other pope with all humane wisdom could ever have done. For it he had expected to part from Rome with its conclusions settled, and all his affairs ordered beforehand as any other pope would have done. He had never brought it to pass, for the King of France would have devised 1,000 excuses, and others would have put him in as many fears. I would let pass his other actions, for all of them were alike, and all of them proved lucky to him, and the brevity of his I never suffered him to feel the contrary. For had he lit upon such times afterwards that it had been necessary for him to proceed with respects, there had been his utter ruin, for he would never have left those ways which he had been naturally inclined. I conclude, then, fortune varying and men continuing, skill obstinate to their own ways, prove happy, while these accord together, and as they disagree, prove unhappy. And I think it's true that it is better to be heady, you need to stay there, than weary, because fortune is mistrust, and it is necessary to keep her in obedience, to rustle and force her, and we see that the sufferer herself rather to be mustered by those than by others that proceed coldly, and therefore as a mistrust she is a friend to young men, because they are less respective, more rough, and commend her with more boldness. You have an attachment. You have committed an act of treason against me. Chap 26. An exhortation to free Italy from the barbarians. Mark. You have committed treason. Your sons committed treason. Having then weighed all things above, discoursed and devising with myself whether at this present in Italy the time might serve to honor a new prince, and whether there were matter that might minister occasion to a wise and valorous prince to introduce such for me that might do honor to him, and good to the whole generality of the people in the country. Methinks so many things concur in favor of a new prince that I know not whether there were ever any time more proper for this purpose, and if, as I said, it was necessary, desiring to see Moses his virtue. I promise you, get that fucking bitch off. That's where you're at with me. Moses his virtue, that the children of Israel should be enthralled in Egypt, and to have experience of the magnanimity of Cyrus his mind, that the Persians should be oppressed by the Medes, and to set forth the excellency of Theseus, and the Athenians should be dispersed. So at this present now we are there we go, self-bomber. We are delirious to know the valor of an Italian spirit. It was necessary Italy should be reduced to the same terms it is now in. How would I see that? How would I be able to see that? Figure it out. What's going wrong here? And more slavery than the Hebrews were. More subject than the Persians. More scattered than the Athenians. Without head, without order, beroused, pillaged, rent asunder, overrun, and had undergone all kind of destruction. Now ever, even in these later days, we have ever some kind of shew of hope in some one, whereby we might have conjectured that he had been ordained for the deliverance thereof. It had proved afterwards that in the very height of all his actions he was curbed by fortune, insomuch that this poor country, remaining as it were without life, attends still for him that shall heal her wounds, given in to all those pillagings and sackings of Lombardy, to those robberies and taxations of the kingdom and of Tuscany, and heal them of their sores, now this long time jandered, we see how the makers her prayers to God, that he sends someone to redeem her from these barbarous cruelties and insolencies. We see her also wholly ready and disposed to follow any colors, provided there be anyone to take them up. Excuse me if I'm wrong about anything. Nor do we see at this present that she can look for other than your illustrious family to become chieftain of this deliverance, which hath now by its own virtue and fortune been so much exalted and favored by God and the church, whereof it now holds the principality. And this shall not be very hard for you to do, if you shall call to mind the former actions and lives of those that are above named. And though those men were very rare and admirable, yet were they men, and every one of them began upon less occasion than this, for neither was their enterprise more just than this, nor more case. Now why would you be able over Charles? Nor was God more their friend than yours. Here is very great justice, for that war is just, that is necessary, and those arms are religious, then there is no hope left overwhere. But in them, here an exceeding good disposition thereto, nor can there be, where there is a good disposition, on great difficulty, provided that use be made of those orders which I propounded for aim and direction to you. Besides this, here we see extraordinary things without example effected by God. The sea was opened, a cloud guided the way, devotion poured forth the waters, and it rained down manna. All these things have concurred in your greatness. The rest is left for you to do. God will not do everything himself, that he may not take from us our free will. And part of the glory that belongs to us, neither is it a marvel if any of the aforenamed Italians have not been able to compass that, which we may hope your illustrious family shall. Though in so many revolutions of Italy, and so many years of war, it may seem that the whole military virtue therein be quite extinguished. For this arises from that the ancient orders thereof were not good, and there hath since been none that hath known how to invent new ones. Nothing can so much honor a man, rising anew, as new laws and new ordinances devised by him. These things, when they have a good foundation given them, and containing in their due greatness, gain him reverence and admiration. And in Italy, there once, I can see you, dude. Once not, we don't want it. Once not the matter wherein to introduce any form. Here is great virtue in the members, were it not wanting in the heads. Consider in the single fights that have been, and duels, how much the Italians have excelled in their strength, adversity, and address. But when they come to armies, they appear nor, and all proceeds from the weakness of the chieftains. For they that understand the management of these of martyrs are not obeying, and everyone presumes to understand hither, to there having not been anyone to highly raised either by fortune or virtue, as that others would submit unto him, from hence proceeded. From hence proceeded that in so long time and in so many best it's and in so many hast is so for these last past 20 years. When there hath been an army wholly Italian, it always hath been evil success. Whereof the river, ooh, I got it out of him. You're being recorded regardless. Aye. Whereof the river Terius first was witness. Afterwards Alexandria, Capia, Gen, Avela, Bolinia, we see you. Next tree, you illustrious family, then being desirous to tread the rooftops of these worthies, whoredomed, their countries, SOS, must above all these things, at the very foundation of the whole fabric, be furnished with soldiers of your own natives, because you cannot have more faithful, true, nor better soldiers. And though every one of them be good, altogether they will become better when they shall find themselves entertained. That's odd. The martyr, here I am, commanded and honored by their own prince. Wherefore it is necessary to provide for those names, whereby to be able with the Italian valor to make a defense against foreigners. You're welcome, but you're not. And however, the Swiss infantry and Spanish be accounted terrible, yet is there a defect in both of them, by which a third order might not only oppose them, but may be confident to vanquish them. For the Spaniards are not able to endure the horse, and the Swiss are fear the foot. When they encounter with them as resolute in the fight as they, whereupon it hath been seen, and upon experience shall be certain, and the Spaniards are not able to bear up against the French cavalry, and the Swiss have been routed by the Spanish foot. And though touching this lose, there hath not been any entire experience. Had yet was there some proof thereof given in the Battle of Ravenna, when the Spanish foot affronted the Dutch battalions, which I keep the same rank with Swisses do, where the Spaniards with their nimbleness of body and the help of their targets entered in under their pikes, and their flood safe to offend them. The Dutchmen having no remedy, and had it not been for the cavalry that rushed in upon them, they had not quite defeated them. There may be then, again, my name is the one on there, so whenever you add these attachments, excuse me, I do not approve. You have committed treason on every level. Is anybody else's name down? I'm not dying for you. I've proven my point. We've rushed into the battle. There may be then another kind of them by a new or ordained, which may be able to make resistance against the worse, and not fear the foot, which shall not be a new which shall not be a new sort of arms, but change of orders, nay. And these are some of those things which ordained anew gain reputation and greatness to a new prince. Therefore this occasion should not be let pass, to the end that Italy after so long a time may see some one redeemer of hers appear. Nor can I expect with what darkness of affection he would be received in all those countries which have suffered by those foreign scums, with what thirst of revenge, with what resolution of fidelity, with what piety, with what tears. Would any gates be shut again him? Any people deny him obedience, any envy oppose him? Would not every Italian fully consent with him? I can see the camera again. This government of the barbarians stinks in everyone's nostrils. Let your illustrious family then undertake this worthy, with that courage and those hopes, wherewith such just actions are to be attempted, to the end that under your colors this country may be enabled, and under the protection of your fortune that saying of Petrarch be verified. Virtue contra fior, prendre l'arme, de fiel combattere couteau, shell antico valor, negli etelci coronon and cor morto. Virtues against fury shall advance the fight, and it is a combat soon shall put to flight, for the old Roman valor is nor dead, nor in the town's breast extinguished. 'Tis